It started on a rainy afternoon, the kind of rain that seems to wash away the sound of everything except pain. A little girl, no older than 7, stumbled barefoot down a dirt road, her tiny hands trembling, her breath shallow. Mud splashed up her torn dress as she ran, her eyes wide with terror. Up ahead, a group of rough, leather-clad bikers sat outside a roadside bar, their massive motorcycles glinting under the gray sky. Most people would have turned the other way. But not her. She ran straight toward them, her voice breaking through the storm, "Please. They're beating my mama." The men froze. Tough, tattooed, faces hardened by years of violence and loss, but something in that little girl's voice cut through all of it. She was crying so hard she could barely speak, pointing toward the woods behind her, where a faint scream carried through the rain. The biggest of the bikers, Tank, a mountain of a man with a scar running across his cheek, slowly stood up. The others exchanged uncertain looks. They were Hell's Angels, feared by nearly everyone in town. Yet, in that moment, none of that mattered. Tank knelt to the girl's level, his voice low but steady. "Who's hurtin' your mama, sweetheart?" She gasped for air. "My stepdad, he's gonna kill her." That was all it took. The engines roared to life, thunder joining thunder. The little girl clung to the back of Tank's jacket as they tore down the muddy trail toward the screams. The other riders followed close behind, their headlights slicing through sheets of rain. When they reached the small shack at the edge of the forest, the sound of chaos filled the air, shattered glass, muffled cries, a man's cruel laughter. Tank didn't knock. He kicked the door in. Inside, a woman lay on the floor, bruised and bleeding. A drunken man stood over her, a belt in his hand, his eyes bloodshot with rage. The moment he turned, Tank charged. The man swung, but Tank caught his arm midair and twisted until a sickening crack echoed through the room. The other bikers swarmed in, dragging him outside, their fury barely contained. The little girl ran to her mother, cradling her face, sobbing, "Mama, I brought help. I brought angels." The woman, barely conscious, looked up through swollen eyes and whispered, "My brave girl," before fainting in her daughter's arms. For a moment, the world went quiet, just rain tapping against the broken window, just breath and tears and the distant growl of thunder. The bikers didn't leave her there. They took the woman and her daughter to the local hospital, staying until the nurses took over. Tank sat outside the room for hours, soaked to the bone, staring at the floor. When the little girl came out, wrapped in a blanket, she climbed onto his lap without saying a word. Tank wasn't used to kids. He didn't know what to do with his hands, his voice, his heart. But something in her small, trusting eyes softened him in a way nothing else ever had. That night, when the cops came asking questions, the Hell's Angels didn't give names. They just said, "We heard a scream, and we did what anyone should have done." Then they got back on their bikes and disappeared into the night. Weeks passed. The little girl and her mother found shelter through a women's center. Life was hard, but safer. Tank checked in sometimes, dropping off groceries, fixing a leaky faucet, or just sitting quietly on the porch while the girl played with her doll. He never said much, but she didn't need him to. She started calling him Uncle Tank. And though he'd never admit it, every time she did, his heart cracked open a little more. But life doesn't stay still. One evening, a few months later, Tank got a call, one that would change everything. The mother had fallen sick, her body weakened from years of abuse. The doctors said she didn't have long. When Tank walked into the hospital room, the woman smiled faintly. "Promise me something," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Take care of her. Don't let her end up like me." Tank swallowed hard. "You got my word." When she passed, the little girl clung to him, sobbing, "Don't let them take me away, please." Tank looked at her, this fragile, fierce little soul who had run through a storm for her mama, and knew what he had to do. He became her guardian, even if it meant breaking every rule he'd lived by. The Hell's Angels weren't exactly the kind of people child services approved of. But Tank didn't care. He fought tooth and nail to give her a home, his home. Slowly, the clubhouse, once filled with roaring laughter and whiskey bottles, turned into something new. A small pink bicycle leaned against the wall. A little bed sat in the corner of his room, covered in stuffed animals. The bikers started watching their language. They even built her a swing out back. The little girl, Lily, grew stronger every day. Her laughter brought light into that dark, rough world. The men who'd once been feared by everyone became her protectors. And Tank, the man who'd never known softness, learned what it meant to love. Years later, at a charity ride for abused families, Tank stood by his bike, watching Lily, now a confident teenager, speak into a microphone. "When I was little," she said, her voice steady, "I thought angels had wings. But sometimes, they have leather jackets and ride Harleys." The crowd fell silent. Tank looked down, blinking fast, pretending it was just dust in his eye. She found him after the speech and hugged him tight. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Tank nodded. "You did too, kid. You kept fighting." As the sun dipped low, painting the sky gold, the roar of engines rose again, louder, prouder, like thunder with a heartbeat, and for once, the Hells Angels weren't feared that night. They were honored, because sometimes, even the toughest men carry the gentlest hearts, and sometimes, the smallest voices can call out to angels who never thought they could be won.